Good morning, good evening, and good day. Welcome to Attack Power Gaming. Thank you so much for being here today. We are going to be going over the Recon tab today and how not to suck with your Recon units. I personally find that the Recon tab is one of the most neglected tabs in the Steel Division 2 deck, so we're going to spend a little bit of time finding some love for it. Now, if you enjoy this content, please consider dropping a like and subscribing to the channel for more Steel Division 2 content. So, let's hop right in here. We're going to look at actually what is considered one of the best divisions currently in the game, and when you watch this it may not be anymore because when they update things it changes, but the 3rd Fallschirmjäger has a great variety of some of the strongest Recon types of units we want to go over today. So our Recon tab, its main function is of course to see enemy units, and that may seem a little bit ridiculous to say, but the truth is these guys do see enemy troops much more efficiently than your other units, especially tanks. Normal tanks do not see enemy units very well at all. A Panzerschreck squad can basically walk up on one of these guys if they're totally by themselves and shoot them quite easily. So it's really important that you actually make sure that you have something to spot for your heavier weapons. Infantry have pretty strong recon optics as is. You can see optics good here. So we're looking at this optic level when we're talking about seeing things. So infantry usually function pretty well as their own recon units. Okay, but if we look at tanks over here, you'll see that the optics are very low, and that's why they have a really hard time seeing things. If we hop over into our support section, we can see a lot of them have good optics as well, along with our anti-tank guns, and this is of course also affected by the stealth. Units with very good stealth are obviously harder to see than units with lower stealth. Now the difference is though, when we hop over here to our Recon tab, we can see that they have very high optics, and oftentimes they'll have very high stealth, exceptional, okay, which is the highest level of stealth. So that's a big deal. Even their vehicles have a half decent amount of stealth. Medium's pretty solid for a vehicle. So that's the advantage of the Recon tab, are these really high optics and really high stealth ratings. Now, how do you use these two things? Well, here's the thing. The Recon tab, units in the Recon tab, every single one do not affect the front line at all. So your units in your Recon tab are completely invisible to the front line, which is a huge deal. And some people might think, well, that's a disadvantage. I want my units to be able to hold territory. And while that's great, you have every other tab to do that. What these guys are for is for sneaking past the front line and causing disruption and destruction behind the enemy's front lines and in locations that they aren't expecting it. And a lot of people do not use their Recon tab effectively enough in this respect. If you actually use your Recon tab to disrupt the enemy instead of simply trying to use them as regular units, you are going to find them to be extremely useful and extremely effective in a lot of different ways. Now, on the flip side of that, the optics side of it, these, like I said, the very high optics will allow you to see enemy units much more efficiently. You'll be able to spot units in buildings from time to time. You'll see units on edges of forests and things, places that you wouldn't normally see, and from much further ranges. That's really the difference, is these guys can spot enemy units from much farther away than, say, just a regular infantry squad, which can spot fine for itself, but will not see enemy units that are far away. So those Recon units can be really useful. So let's go over the basic Recon units. There's a couple different kinds in the Recon tab, and these are not specifically defined by the game. These are sort of my own definitions for these different Recon units. So the first and most basic, which I believe every single division in the game has, is the 2-man basic Recon squad. It's literally 2 guys. They have 2 submachine guns. The Allies have a similar version of this on the other side. For the Germans, it's called the Aufklär. This is in every division, this 2-man Recon squad. I personally don't use them unless I am very, very short on Recon and I have nothing else to use in the Recon section. These guys aren't very useful. Now, one thing, though, for the Germans specifically, is for some divisions, the Aufklärs can be brought in the Spätwagen 222. Okay, which is like an armored car essentially with an autocannon. That's very, very good. So if you can bring in your Aufklärs in that 222, which this division can't, but if you can do that, you absolutely should. They're obviously much more expensive that way. Instead of 15 points, I believe they're 40, but that's absolutely worth every penny. You definitely want to use those. So that's your most basic Recon unit. If you have to use them, it's okay, but truthfully, if I had to use this 2-man squad, I would actually probably hop over here and use the artillery version, because this guy comes with a radio, which allows your artillery to be more accurate. Now, I don't really use these guys either, but the fact is, if I had to use one of them, I'd use these guys. So our next kind of unit in the Recon section that most divisions have, I believe all do, but most have in some sort of version, is a 4-man just recon squad. Okay, they have a variety of different weapons, and this one, it happens to be 2 submachine guns and 2 automatic rifles. That's really rare. These are special for this division. Most of the time, it's like 2 rifles and maybe a machine gun and a submachine gun. These guys are, in my opinion, completely useless. This is, these guys are not strong enough to fight enemy infantry, and they're too big, and they're too well armed to hide places. They are going to end up shooting at enemy troops and stuff. They're just more expensive than your 2-man squad. I don't find these units to be useful. They strike a really weird middle point where they can't do the sneaky stuff you want recon to do, but they can't do the heavier stuff you want infantry to do. So I generally advise that you don't take these 4-man squads. Now, if they have a bazooka or an AT weapon of any sort, totally different story. You want those. If your recon squad has any sort of anti-tank, that's fantastic. And that comes to our next unit here. This is just their version of an infantry squad in your recon tab. Many recon tabs will have some sort of infantry squad in them. I categorize them as recon squads with AT and recon squads without AT. I don't find the recon squads without AT to be super useful. They're just generally weak infantry squads. They're generally just weakened versions of normal infantry squads, so I don't suggest using those. On the other hand, if they have any sort of AT weapon, the allies have the Razvedka, has the bazooka. I always advise taking those. They're a big bazooka squad, which is always useful. They don't affect the front line. They can sneak behind enemy troops. In this case, this unit is a very effective regular infantry unit as well. It's 10 men. It has a light machine gun. It's got a whole bunch of submachine. This is a very effective squad. But you'll find these infantry squads in all the recon tabs. You have to kind of determine each one which is useful. The Germans have a Fusilier squad. The one that has actual AT grenades is somewhat useful. It's again a weak infantry squad, but it can find its uses. So it all comes down to what you feel you need. If you need extra infantry units in your division, then by all means take them. But if they have AT, I do strongly suggest that for sneaking around and doing damage. The next big section of the Recon tab is your armored cars. Armored cars are very strong in this game. Just in a general sense, for both sides, Allies and Axis, armored cars just tend to perform very well. They tend to outperform their cost. The Germans have generally just access to these autocannon, so these will fire very rapidly, and the shells essentially will wipe out infantry squads very quickly. Every burst of the autocannon, depending on the cover the enemy squad is in, can kill 2 to 4 infantry from the squad. It's very, very effective. It pins them down very quickly. These are very good units. They're very fast. They have all the optics and everything that you want out of your recon units. I strongly suggest taking these when available and when you have the points available. These make for great pushes, especially when you play against divisions that don't have a lot of AT infantry, so like their infantry don't have AT naturally on them. These units can be a real headache. They can essentially function as really fast tanks. They're not designed for killing enemy armor, but they can kill enemy transports. Sometimes they can even kill enemy AT guns if you get into a good position and can catch them out. They kill things very fast. So autocannon weapons in this game are very strong. I always suggest taking them. Some armored cars, especially the Allied armored cars, the Western Allies, especially the Western Allies, but even the Soviets and some German divisions have not autocannon armored cars, so they fire single shots and shells and things. Those are things to research yourself and decide which are strong. So if we hop over here really quick for the Germans, the Hermann Göring here has the SPW-233. You'll run into this a lot. Very strong unit. Fires, I would always suggest taking these. They have heat shells that they have quite a range, a 1500 meter AP shell range. It's a very effective unit, and its HG shells are very high damage. This is essentially right out of the support tab in terms of damage. These are great. They do a lot of damage. I always suggest taking them. When you look at, say, the New Zealand, they have these Staghounds, which are similar, where they fire slower, but they do a lot of damage. They have a high AP. The HE is low, but you get the machine guns on here too. So most of the time, armored cars are very worthwhile. Now, if the armored car only has like a machine gun, then it's probably not. But for the most part, all these kind of different armored cars can do a lot of damage, can be really, really effective. So I do suggest taking those. I almost forgot one more significant portion of the Recon tab, and that is snipers. So snipers are very strong units. They often come in 2-man teams. Sometimes they're 3. You even have some bigger 4-man squads. And these are extremely effective for their price and their size. A sniper will very quickly suppress enemy units. It will kill enemy units very often. So after 3-4 shots from a sniper rifle, most squads will be pinned down and will have lost 2 to 3 men out of that squad. So these are really, really useful. I usually take snipers when possible. I like having snipers. They function great in their usual role of reconning, but then they can also do a lot of damage to infantry units at the beginning of the game, especially the ally ones with the faster transports. You can get these guys to the front line first, and they can pick off transports. They can shoot transports very effectively. They usually don't kill them, but they can force them to unload, which can be really, really useful. So whenever you have snipers as an option, you should definitely take them. We can see here in the 4th Munte division, this is probably the strongest sniper division in the game. It has these units here, the Venatore Secetore. I said that wrong, I am sorry. They have 2 snipers, which is just so stupid strong. It pin an enemy squad down in 2 shots. It's really, really strong. They also have regular snipers here, which I'd have in if I could fit them. And then they have sniper infantry squads, essentially, which are large, normal size squads with snipers as well. These are really strong, great units. These in particular come with Panzerfaust as well. Whenever you can have infantry squads with snipers, you want to take those. They're basically upgunned infantry squads. That sniper is pretty close to a machine gun, at least in my opinion. It actually shoots further than a machine gun and can pin almost faster than most machine guns. So snipers in this game are really strong. Always consider taking them when they're in your recon tab. Finally, in the recon tab, we can find ourselves some armor. Some recon tabs will have tanks in them. These are essentially exactly the same as the normal versions of these tanks. So this is exactly the same as a normal Panther D, except that it has much higher optics and a little bit of stealth to it. So these can be very strong. They are more expensive though. Because of that, they are more expensive. You have to keep that aware. If you can do the Panzer III, I always do this. This is a absolutely fantastic tank. You should use it. Its cost for its damage and everything is very, very high, especially the recon version because it gets to see everything as well. But if you have these in the tank tab or in the recon tab, you should be taking these. These are just great units. So that is the recon tab in a nutshell. Don't neglect this. Yes, your infantry can spot for your guys just fine. You can use them that way and it's great. You can neglect your recon tab, but there are so many uses for the recon tab outside of simply seeing enemy troops. Don't forget that. Use this tab, check it out, make sure you check for strong, abnormally strong units. Don't take recon just for the sake of taking recon, but you do want some recon. It does make a difference to be able to actually see your opponent, and you'll find that out really quick in a deck that has no recon at all. There's going to come situations where you're going to say, well, I really wish I could see what was going on there, and you're going to have no access to that. So keep that in mind. Don't go nuts in it, but that is how you use your recon tab. It's for both seeing, but even more importantly, it's for sneaking. It's for catching your opponent off guard, disrupting their back lines, and doing damage that you would never get to otherwise. Thanks so much for watching. If you enjoy this content, please drop a like and consider subscribing. Have a fantastic day.